Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Uh, Before we get started, Councilmember Sproul will lead us in prayer, and I ask everyone please stand for the pledge.
Lord, we thank you for an opportunity to come together and invite the city to participate in this long overdue opportunity to change our charter, give the citizens a chance to change it. Lord, as we go through these things, help us to see clearly what would be best for our city and word it in such a way and make it plain. Bless us in all that we do. We ask these things in Jesus' name, amen.
All right, before we get started into the, in our, excuse me. Again, before we get started, I'd just like to say we have our, one of our council members, Mr. Hegman, will be online. Also, our legal advisor, Ms. Lee. The agenda item tonight is a simple workshop for a charter election. I ask that we all, if anyone in the public would like to speak on this item, we basically, that is the only thing on the agenda for tonight, and we don't want to go far outside of that at all. So if you have any comments or questions, anything, please make sure it's related to the charter. At this time, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to our legal advisor, Ms. Lee.
Mr. Mayor, are you ready for me?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So thank you for having me this evening. I understand that this agenda is to just, what's on the agenda tonight is just one matter, and that is consideration of a charter election potentially in the future here. So I wanted to give you just a little bit of background about a city charter and also the process that the city is undertaking. So the city of Mount Pleasant became a home rule city in 1948. Home rule cities are governed by a city charter. That is basically the document that creates a home rule city. And in this instance, and in the state of Texas, a charter is sort of like a constitution for the city, the same way that we have a state constitution and a federal constitution. As a home rule city, the city of Mount Pleasant looks to state law only to see what it cannot do, what it's restricted from doing. If there are no restrictions on what it's doing, it's basically got a lot of latitude in how it proceeds forward, so long as it's in accordance with its charter. Home rule cities differ from general law cities, which look to determine whether or not state law permits them to do something. They actually need express authority to allow them to do something. So the city of Mount Pleasant's charter has been in existence since 1948. The last time that it amended its charter was in 2002. And so you can amend your charter as frequently as every 2 years, but not more frequently than that. And so the city is able to go ahead and consider amendments to its charter. So the process right now, what you have before you and what the people that are here at the meeting have is possible charter election, possible amendments to the charter that would be presented to the voters for election. So most of the amendments that are redlined on the document that has been provided to you are basically just legal changes to bring the city into compliance with state law, basically eliminating obsolete language from your charter or updating it with current references to the right statutes and the right provisions that are applicable at this point in time. There are a few things that are a little bit more substantive that are proposed, like there's a reference to residence requirements, and there's a reference to term limits and some things like that. But most of the others are just basically bringing them into compliance with the with state law as it is now. The council set this meeting and a meeting on July 30th to receive additional input from the public about any items that might be considered for a charter election. And that also allows the city council members to discuss additional things that they might like to have included on a potential charter election ballot. From today's meeting, additional revisions could be drafted if there are other things to be included on a proposed ballot. Once those will then could be talked about again on July 30th, and then at the first meeting in August, or if the city council wants to call a special meeting, you would have to then decide what to include on a proposed ballot that would then go before the voters for consideration. Your deadline for that is it has to be done by August 16th, and the council is actually approving what would be on the ballot. So all of these legal revisions that I was referring to, that would be one item on the ballot, and then separate issues that are more of a substantive nature would be considered one by the voters, so that they could vote for some and not against and against others, or however that would, however the voters decide to choose to vote. So again, the council has discretion to decide what to include on that, but we have a fairly tight deadline of being ready by August 16th. So once the ballot is approved, it will be submitted to the voters at the November election for consideration. For today's meeting, the council members can discuss whatever they would like to have considered about potentially about a charter election or amendments to the charter. But that is the only topic that can be considered by either the members of the council or by members of the public. And so if people they might have reasons why they want to consider a charter amendment. And so I would encourage you to be focused on what the proposed amendment would be, or what that desire is to amend the charter, rather than discussing external things. Also, similarly, council, I'd like to caution you not to respond if members of the public start to talk about other subjects. Mayor, you have the authority to, cease that discussion by a member of the public. And also, council, please refrain from discussing other matters, because your agenda only has the one item and you want to ensure that you're compliant with the Open Meetings Act. So in terms of allowing people to speak, people can be given some latitude. It's not the same as having the 2-minute limit that the council uses when there's public comment at a regular council meeting. But I would encourage you, Mayor, to also consider, allowing, if there are multiple people to speak, making sure that everybody has an opportunity. Somebody could come back up and speak again if they wanted to. But, you want to allow everybody to have an opportunity to reasonably explain what is of interest or concern to them. So there's some changes that are legal in nature. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just to give you a little bit of an example, like in Article 2, Section 1, the references there to the revised civil statutes, that has been replaced now by provisions of the Texas Local Government Code and laws of the other laws of the state. So things like that are the types of changes that have been made or recommended by my office to address legal concerns and obsolete provisions. That continues in various provisions there on the second page, including things about referring to limitations about street powers that are included in the Texas Transportation Code. in section 5, there's another transportation code provision to be included. Annexation is in accordance with Chapter 43 of the Texas Local Government Code, so those references are included. We have recommended that you eliminate the regulation of the railroads because the city does not have that authority. That is regulated by the Texas Department of Transportation and the Federal Railroad Administration. And so we've recommended that you just delete that provision. Other things, we've suggested that Article 4, Section 5 be removed and just reserved to allow for other additions or changes there. But and that provision has specifically been repealed. That's referenced there. So there's a number of those provisions. I'm happy to answer any questions about them, but I don't think it's particularly helpful for you to go through those in detail. Now, when we get over to Article 6, those are more substantive provisions. And so that's something that those are related to, like terms of office, a proposal of potentially having term limits. There's some provisions there about vacancy and then also on residency, having qualifications to make sure that people who are submitting for election or to run for election, that they meet those residency requirements. It is our recommendation that be dealt with more as an ordinance of the city. And so with that, I think that's there's also a residency requirement that's proposed for the city manager after an initial 6 months. And so those are largely it continues on, but largely with legal basic updates or suggestions and recommendations to you. So and as I say, I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them about it. But I would just basically suggest that the council, at this point, Mayor, you can turn it over to other council members to discuss things that they're interested in, that you're interested in, for discussion purposes. But it just has to be strictly limited to potentially charter amendments or a charter election. And with that, I will turn it back to you, Mayor.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Lee, for all you do. I appreciate you addressing the public and clarifying a lot of those things that we're getting ready to get involved in. At this time, I'll open the floor to the council to address whatever changes you want to change, and also, if you don't mind, I'd ask just to give the public a reason why you would want to make those changes.
I'll go first. Okay, let me pull this. I started studying the charter a couple of years ago, and did not realize how old it was as far as no updates. And the one thing that I noticed was there was a lot of I call it blurred lines, things that were not clear. And so if things are not clear, then that means that people can fall between the cracks. And I think some of the issues and the trouble that has happened with this council has been due to some blurred lines. So I want to make sure that what we work on kind of clears things up, puts the right wording in place, so that the council never goes through this again. And the council that will be coming after we leave, maybe even 15 years from now, I hope they have another vote instead of waiting since, 2002. But we need to make sure these things are shored up and that we are able to work between the lines, and so within our lines. So the first thing I want to kind of mention is the terms of office. Now, it's not so much that I am, when I say that I'm 75% sure, because I want to hear from the people. So in regard to the terms of office, I have studied Gainesville, Texas, who has a population of around 18,000, Kilgore, which is around 13,000, Jacksonville, which is 14,000, Nacogdoches, which is 32, but of course that includes the college. You know, they're close to us. Sulphur Springs. So when you look at what I consider the towns in Paris, Paris has 24,000 and Sulphur Springs has the closest to us. Some populations say 16,005, and then some say 15,009. So when I went back and looked at their charters and compared their charters to ours, quite a few of the majority of these do have term limits. They vary. One thing that I thought was interesting, and again, when I sat down with Candace and Frank, who is the attorney from the same firm that Lee is, he suggested that most of the towns they represent are doing about it's a 3-term limit, and that they are stepping off for a time, and then they certainly can run again. They can, that's certainly something they can do. So when I went back and looked at these cities, the majority of them do have the term limits. And they do also have where you can step down. And my reasoning for that, for doing the term limits, is because I have noticed how hard it is to get people involved in city and local politics. And I want to make sure that people that do get involved in our city and local politics are getting involved for the right reason, that their heart is there to help the city and not just, I just want to make sure they're here to help the city. I also want to make sure that we get some younger people that are starting to get acclimated into the city so that they will be able to take care of us when we are older. So those are my reasonings for why I would like to see term limits. So I'll leave it to the rest of you guys to discuss. And it's not just, this is not a for sure thing. It's I want to hear from the people, and I want to hear from the other council.
Do we have anyone in the public that would like to speak on it? Please come up and state your name.
Good evening. Steve Bolster, Mount Pleasant, 3240. What is it? No, 1497 County Road, 3240, Mount Pleasant. Sorry. Appreciate your ideas on changing the charter. If I do understand city council, the things that are redlined really need to be changed because they conflict with state laws. Is that correct? Do I have that correct? So those changes really have to happen anyway. Is that a fair statement on that?
Yes, that's true.
Okay.
And also, even if you didn't change them, you would have to comport with state law, right?
Sure.
Like even if yeah.
Okay, so that's good. I understand that. I guess my question is, have we had a problem because we haven't had term limits?
I haven't foreseen in the past as it being a problem myself.
Yeah. I haven't, again, I only have 10 years history here, but I don't see a problem with term limits as they stand right now. And one of the problems is I wonder about the demographics of the other cities that you brought up, because I don't know that we have a pool of people that are valid enough that want to throw themselves in front of the lions here. And with that, I have a lot of respect for everyone who decides to run. But it's nice when you have a good council member who's devoted, who stays. I think we've also had very good luck when it's time for a change. The people do vote, and they change, And quite frankly, this city council is evidence to that effect of the city, as much as we would like to have more people get involved. But I have a little bit of a concern with limiting ourselves before we even have a problem. So that's just my thoughts. I'd like to keep it more open, more available for people to run who want to run. If I may ask the attorney a question, I'd like to understand, is it against the law to put a proposal together to compensate city council folks monetarily more than just $25 a month? And the reason I'm asking that is because I was involved in a couple city issues. I spent a lot of time researching and trying to find out the correct information before I came in front of the city council. That's a tremendous amount of devotion that we're asking the city council members to do. And I'm almost wondering if this has changed from 1947 to something more of a full-time job to get the information correctly, because what I think was originally intended is that the city council would be handed a proposal that was supposedly unbiased, and they would be able to make the decision, come here on a Tuesday night and make decisions. Unfortunately, some of the issues have become so much more complicated that it requires a lot more attention to this. And I'm almost wondering if that would attract more candidates to these positions and higher quality. Not that you're not high quality, please. But it would just encourage the job more if these folks were compensated for doing this. So I'm asking, is it against the law to have a proposal that would pay these city council members more accordingly to what they're doing? And with that, my thought is there's a $36 million budget that the city of Mount Pleasant has. If I'm incorrect on my numbers, please tell me. That's a big business. $36 million is a lot. And to have just a city manager to run it and then volunteers essentially to make decisions, I'm just wondering if the model has changed. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir. Lee, would you like to address that question?
Sure. So the law does not prohibit cities from compensating its council members for their service. Obviously, it should bear some relationship to the work that's involved. But what Mr. Bolster noted about it being an involved and committed obligation, and sometimes that has caused people who maybe are somewhat younger in their life or aren't able to dedicate the time and effort that's involved unless there was compensation. And so there has been a move among some communities to add to that. Certainly that has been true in some of the larger cities in Texas, because they weren't able to get people who would serve otherwise, and particularly in some places, it is truly a full-time job. And so, what I would say is it is certainly not illegal to do it, but if it is something that is desired, then you would want to alter your charter, since right now it says $50 for the mayor and $25 for each council member.
And Lee, I'm sorry, but who the voters would decide that amount, whatever amount it is, correct?
That's correct. Like if there was a proposal on considered, it would be to change that amount, or to change, it could be per meeting, it could be, it could be a different amount entirely than the 50 or 25. but there would need to be something specific that was considered, and then that the council would put forward for the ballot to be decided by the voters.
Okay, thank you. I did a little bit of research on that, and in 1948, I believe, when the charter was done, the $50 and the equivalence of what that is today, and I'm certainly not proposing it, but I'm saying the equivalence of $50 then was $650. $650 back in 1948 was pretty much almost, I guess you could say, a salary of some sort. So, I mean, I'm certainly not proposing it, but if someone in the community proposed, and again, they set the salary of whatever that, the stipend or whatever it is, that is on the community. Yes, you can come back up, sir.
I'll be brief. I look at this as it's $36 million. If you peeled off even $500,000 in figuring out compensation, that's a small compensation for managing a $36 million budget. Personally, I would be in favor of that because I only got a little bit of a taste what you have to go through, what you're doing on the other side of this podium. So I'd be happy to help work with that. I would be in favor of that. I just think it would put more encouragement and more activity into the city and into the efforts of growing this city. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I will also say there's been many citizens that have asked questions, and people that have asked, hey, why don't you run? I find a lot of smart, intelligent people out there that would otherwise run for council, but if they will not run for council with what we receive right now. And I think we're missing out on a lot of intelligent people that would be beneficial to our city because of that reason. Sir?
Kind of stole my thunder. As to what Mr. Mayor said, you're absolutely correct. I've actually done a little research in the past of what $50 was. I collect coins and things like that, so I go back and see what then compared to now. I am absolutely not opposed to you guys having a salary. The past 2 years that I've been in front of this council, there's been a lot of time, as Steve had pointed out, and you guys definitely are worth something if you're doing all this research, and I know you guys are. However, where I guess I differ, although I guess where I differ is on the term limits. As we see in our state and federal system, especially, people get into politics, they get a really good salary, and the next thing you know, they go in with nothing and come out 20 years later as multimillionaires. And I'm going to say it, I hope it's not a slap to the face or an insult, but over the past 2 or 3 years, I've seen a lot of money. Can we say how much we were 3.5 years ago for a budget, or for what the city owed as compared to now? A lot of money going out. However, I do agree that if there is a salary involved, and there is research going on, and there is cool heads voting for the betterment of the city, absolutely. And then maybe if we do a salary, then put a term limit on it. I'm opposed to 3 years, but you know what? With a salary, maybe, or 3 terms, maybe that is the goal. So definitely something to think about. I would love to hear city folks get up here instead of us county folks, to actually talk about this type of stuff. So there's where I differ a little bit.
Candace, are there anybody making comments or asking questions?
No comments, but we did have one lady who said, I think the pay for the mayor and council should be adjusted to double what it's currently, $150. $100 for the mayor and $50 for council members. This needs to compensate for their time and going to official function. I believe in the term limits. 5 terms, 10 years would be a good number. If they are out of office in 2 terms, then they would be able to try for another election. The mayor, council, and definitely city manager should have a permanent residence inside the city limits. Expenses that require reimbursement from the council should have prior approval.
Do we have anyone else in the public?
Good afternoon, I'm Jerry O'Connor. I do live in the county, not inside the city, out on 3240. So, term limits, let your public decide that. If you put a salary behind your job, which I do believe you need, because be honest with yourself, those that were actually here whenever we were looking at that contract, did you read through it? And if you did read through it, who did you ask questions to that you didn't understand? You put a lot of effort into that. And you shouldn't just be doing it. You should be doing it to do a good job. And if you're just breezing over it because you're not getting paid about it and you got your mind on a whole bunch of other things, because times are tight right now, then you're not putting your full effort into this. I believe there should be equal compensation for the effort that you're putting into it. And it keeps it nice. I mean, it keeps it even and above board. There needs to be some accountability for some things around as well. On the term limit side, let your public decide on that if you're going to stay with a low monetary reimbursement amount.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I am a city resident, and I've done so much research the last few years, I've got more gray hair than I should have at this age.
When I started, this was black.
I know, I remember. Here's the thing, I don't like the idea of salaries. I did some more research, and I looked at a lot of cities around here, and I looked at some of the cities that are getting salaries, and the salaries are pretty good. I don't want anyone coming and serving on this council for a salary. You have to do it out of the love and the need and the respect and the desire to have a better city. And I think that's the only thing that should motivate you. However, I do believe in compensation for what you do. I know just what I've gone through over the last few years. I carry around a trunk of paperwork from what I research. And I know y'all are doing the same thing because I've talked to some of you. But I would certainly support $500 to $750 a month for your offices. I know the work you're doing, and I know how hard that is right now. And another reason I wouldn't support salaries is we're losing. We've lost $500,000 with the county fire. We're going to lose Tri-Water. We're going to lose a couple of million there. We're overspending in nearly every aspect of our city. We have spent more money the last 4 years on things that are questionable, to say the least. But I would not support salaries. I wouldn't support it for myself, and I do intend to run. Wouldn't support it, but I do believe that 500 to 750, whatever y'all come up with, or what the citizens think, and have another meeting on it. But I would certainly support that, because I see the time, I see the work, I see the effort. And I would also say that you get compensated if you're driving to TML on business meetings such as that, and that would be the only kind of compensation, what you turn in and what's regulated every time you turn it in. But I would support a salary of 500 to 750, and I would encourage others to do the same.
All right, thank you.
I would like to say one thing for the people that are listening, because there could be some confusion, and so I'm hoping to kind of sum this up a little bit. My understanding of the charter is that is our Constitution, which means that what is written is what goes. That's our city law. And that any change in the charter has to be done by you, the people, not the council members sitting behind here. So there can't be votes done back here and there can't be salaries set back here. And there can't be changes to this charter back here. They have to be done by the people. And if it's done correctly, and the people vote, and they all come to we meet halfway in the middle, whatever. It's not, I don't believe that we should be coming up with our own suggestions. I think that it's the people that need to be they're very vocal about what their wishes are. That's why I was asking Candace if anybody else has made any comments, because, that was something that was a very hot topic and has been for the last couple of years. And I want to make sure that these things that are being addressed, whether it's term limits, expenses, whatever, these things have to be definite, because I'll use me as an example. I've only been on here a month and a half. I don't want to hear from somebody that will suggest that I could do this or I could do that, and those suggestions might not line up with our charter. I'm brand spanking new, and those of you that have watched me know that I make mistakes all the time with Robert's rules or this or that, and I don't understand things. And if someone made a suggestion to me that I could do this or that, I am now fearful to follow anyone's suggestions. I want to make sure that it's in black and white and that nobody gets in trouble, that everybody knows exactly what's expected of us. So that's why I'm so thankful we're having these discussions, and I would open it up for more of y'all to discuss about that.
Okay, I think it was there a second part of the terms that you wanted to initiate it towards the?
On the terms?
Yes, ma'am.
On the term limits, yeah, going back to the terms, because I was going over what I call the hot topics, and I started with that one first. And I think, Steve brought it up, Dave talked about it. Those are things that I think people need to discuss. I think it was Jimmy that talked to me earlier that made the comment that, let the election work for itself, that, people could be beat out. One thing I see is that, elections can get tough, and there's a lot of knowledge in the brains of a lot of people who've sat back here. And to me, I think you want to keep them involved. Some of them, they've got a lot of good knowledge. And so, anyway, I thought term limits might help people not get offended, where we could still use them. But that's going to be up to the people to decide if there's a term limit situation or not. And that's why we want to discuss these things.
One thing aside of the term limits in its whole, I'm speaking of the amount of years one term is from 2 to 3 years. I think someone had mentioned that to me, and I thought that was part of the term limits, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Well, I think what was suggested to me by some of the cities that this legal firm has represented is that, we serve for 2 years. And they suggested some of them are doing 6 years. And I've studied. There's some that are not doing term limits at all. There are some that their term is 3 years with a 3-year term. So, again, this is our opportunity for the people of Mount Pleasant to decide.
Yes, please.
Forgive my ignorance in, I guess, basic civics when it comes to city and stuff, but it is my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, as this council sits right now, even if we had Debbie up in that seat, when it comes down to things, as far as for the city, it is the city council that pretty much votes and then enacts that into action, correct? Okay. As city mayor, as our charter stands right now, you are the one that brings this all together. You have a vote if there's a tie?
Only if it's a tie. That is something that in the charter, but I also have, and I was actually waiting to everyone got finished, because what I have here is petitions that were put in. And I'm gonna pass one to each one of the council members, and I actually give you one, and you can kind of spread it around out there. Greg, I think you want- okay. I don't know how many people we have out there. Okay, all right. Here is a petition that was put together a while back. It didn't go forward because it didn't have enough signatures. And it was a part of the charter that I was going to bring up as far as I felt that needed to be addressed. I think Section 12 of the amending charter here, it says 10% of the number of those who voted at the last regular municipal election, provided, however, that in latter either position must hear the signatures of at least 100 electors. Anyways, it was supposed to be 10%, but that was our old charter before it was amended. It's not addressed in the new charter, the updated charter. So that there was some confusion about it, because we was thinking it was 10% of the, as it said in the old charter, 10% of the people that had voted in that previous election. That would have been enough for those people to be able to vote on it. But because it wasn't addressed in the amended charter, we had to go by what the state had before us. And the state was 5% of the registered voters. So that number goes sky high. So if you look at the amount of people that was in that voted in the previous election, Candace, do you have a number on that? It would have
May
been
of
the
this year?
election. Would have been the election prior to this last one. And Sherry, was that the one you went through?
I will say this, sorry. In regards to the petition, there was the city of Mount Pleasant residents, there were 7,658 at the time of
Yep.
the petition that was out there. So that's how many registered voters were in the city limits at that time.
And the amount of people that voted in that election, which would have been the amount, 10% of that amount, according to that old charter.
The one from 2002?
No, that was the amended charter. I'm saying I'm saying it's not addressed in the 2002 charter. That's why we went by what the state recommended. My point is that need to be addressed in the charter. If we're going to either follow state or we need to have some identification with it. Yes.
If I may, so covering you, and then when it comes to Mr. Nyhoff, he's the city manager. Mr. Nyhoff, I hail from Oregon, was high schooled in Massachusetts, much like California. I understand. You're strong, man. I get it. What my point is that when we start talking about salaries and things like that and term limits, I'm not so much worried about a term limit on a mayor or on a city manager. I mean, you guys, you're either going to get voted in because you're doing a good job, you're going to get voted out. Either way. And with all due respect, you really don't make. These are the votes here. Now I understand, what your job purpose, but so I'm more worried in term limits and pay. you know, for the amount of time with these guys than I really am with you or even with him. You guys are going to face elections. These guys, while they face elections, if they're getting paid, I guess I just want to follow back up. If there needs to be term limits if there's going to be pay, because I don't want to see us get into a system where somebody goes on. Look at the damage that was done in the past 4 years, just with one single council. So that was 2 elections. So
Okay.
Well, what I was going to say is on the term limits, the reason I wanted to bring it up is because they're just, if there's not going to be a discussion, if everybody, so far, I think everyone that spoke tonight has said no on it, I think, well, no, I think. But that's where I want to hear from more people. I want people to be able to say, this is like your one time, speak now. So, you know, I'm ready to move on after we talk about, you know, to end this discussion on terms of office, because I really want people to discuss it. And we can move on then to the next one, which after that I wanted to bring it up, and I'm going to look at Candace and I'm going to look at Lee, which is the vacancies. So, we have a situation where we have a city councilman that resigned, and we were looking at having a special election.
Yeah, not to cut you off, but before we move on, the term, and I understand you were talking about term limits. I was speaking on the length of a term, as far as from 2 years to 3 years per term. And that was something that I was gonna bring up because of the fact, the work that the council, the amount of work that has to be put in, you're just getting going within that first year. You're just getting going. You don't have a time to even get set in place to know the ins and outs enough. The turnaround is too fast, personally for me. 2 years, that, and then getting ready for a campaign every 2 years. So, and I don't know how the public feels. That's why we're here. And that was just something that I wanted to bring. And I'm not sure what you guys think about that.
Mayor Craig, I think you bring up a great point, that you're absolutely right. You're trying to come up to speed very quickly. It's 12 or 24 meetings in a year, and there's a lot of stuff that's going on. Personally, I don't think 3 years is a bad idea. I think that's a pretty good idea, actually. I think it would also ease up for you or everybody to develop their stride versus worrying about what happens next year, to your point. So I think that's in my mind, a pretty good change. I think that would be. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
For ones that don't know me, I'm Jimmy Vaughn from Mount Pleasant, Texas. I agree with what Tracy had said. The term limits do need to be increased, because the learning process that y'all are going through, 1 year, 2 years time for election, not long enough. The stride in this that y'all are doing, the compensation you need, I'm agreeing on all of it. Let's get this thing cut down to where it belongs for today's standards. Let's get a longer term limit. If it's a salary involved on the city council, I want a term limit. Otherwise, you're going the way you're going on it. Because term limit is good in some standards. I don't see anybody, unless they embezzle money from here, and that's gonna be pretty tough with Debbie around. I had to put that in there. So, y'all do what you're doing. I think you're doing a great job so far, and I'm gonna be a big nuisance.
All right, thank you, sir. Here you had some.
Yes, thank you. I will say that based on my experience here and the times that I've been up for election, it was overwhelming the first year. There was quite a learning curve to even understand how the city works and the budgets work and all the pieces that make it whole. I actually I think a 3-year term would be beneficial. It's also expensive to run. It's expensive these days to buy the signs and the things and whatever it takes to run. I think that also precludes a lot of people that would like to run, because unless they have someone donate some money to them, a lot of just good everyday folk have hard times coming up with the money to buy the needed signage. Mainly, signs are really expensive. So I don't know how you fix that or how you address that. I don't know. Ms. Ream may have an idea from other cities that she's aware of. If there could be, if you are elected, maybe there could be an amount set to help reimburse some of that signage expense. I would like to find a way going forward for the next folk that come our way to sit in these seats to be able to afford to run. That's where it starts. You got to get them able to run. It is a daunting task to run. I absolutely am in favor of 3-year terms. I know that would have to be, I don't know how that would work, because we're already set up on a staggered 2 years, coming on and off. I don't know about the legal people could help with that. So there's that. And you're talking about pay. It's one thing to get a few $100s like Debbie Rick suggested to help along. When I think of a salary, I think of a living wage, where this would become almost a full-time job. I'm just to clear up terminology there. It may be called a salary if it's $500 or $700, whatever, but when I hear salary, I'm thinking of a living wage where a person could dedicate full-time to it. So I don't know if that needs to be cleared up as we go forward with wording these potential amendments. As far as term limits, that's a touchy one. I think if you got 50 people in this room, you'd hear some people say set term limits. I know if it's a true paid living wage, then it definitely is a little different weight on it. So I'd like to be careful what we're calling a wage or a salary or something, And again, and it wouldn't have to be much, even a couple $1,000s if the person wins to help reimburse them. I just want people to be encouraged and have an ability to run. I think there's some good people out there, and that was one of the things that almost kept me from running the first time. When I looked at the expense of it, I'm like, for $25 a month, I'm going to spend this much money to buy this many signs. It was discouraging for me. So I appreciate all the comments from everybody. I think this is huge. I think it's very needed. I could actually flip a coin on term limits.
Ms. Debbie?
I would absolutely support a 3-year term. I'm not sure about the term limits. If you're a good person, I think it's good that you stay here. If not, we get rid of you. But I would think the 3-year is a good deal, and I would say even a salary or a compensation package of $500 a month, $600 for the mayor. I would have we could put that down in black and white. I would never support the salaries. I don't think you run for the salaries if you're looking at a living wage. But I think the 3-year thing is a pretty good deal.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Might offer this suggestion. Each one of you, over the course of the next 30 days, probably a little less than that, because you said we're having another meeting on this the 30th?
Is that
Is
the
it?
30th?
Okay,
Yes.
so it'd be the 30th. So between now and then, which is what, 21 days? Take yourself a notepad. Every day that you put into doing something city council, and you guys are real busy right now trying to clear some stuff up, I know. Write down the time. And on the 30th, come back and report to the people how much time you've put into it. Again, taking into effect, you're doing a lot more than you probably otherwise would be right now. as compared to any other time. And then let's figure out, what's minimum wage? What's a living wage? Let's have both these discussions, and negotiate with your voters of what's fair. Because once again, like everybody else standing behind me, we put a lot of time in when we were going after some of you guys. So I know how much time it goes in. So, let's figure it out.
All righty, thank you. And so I'll just say some of my time aside research and whatnot. But as the mayor and representative of the city, I get asked to go and speak at different places. I go to the universities here locally. Sometimes I go to Texas A&M. I've been asked out to several different colleges. And I do get chewed out a bit by my wife because of the compensation. Because for me to drive to A&M and back and speak here and speak there, and I get asked for, of course, my duties is to go to the ribbon cuttings and all of that and special events. So it is a lot to sit in this position and with the compensation of $50. And I get a lot of people ask me, and they say there's no way they would do it. But the fact is, I love the city and I love what we're doing, and I want to see the city grow and prosper. To me, it's not about the money. It's about just compensating for what we do. I'm sorry, Ms. Candace, you had them?
Yes. Sarah Adlers asked, as a county resident who conducts a significant amount of business in the city, having a vote on matters that impact that business would help me feel like I matter beyond sales tax revenue. She also then said, would you consider adding to the charter a required regular maintenance of the voter rolls to remove deceased, relocated, and ineligible residents? And what about a voluntary donation amount with auto registration that could go to the campaign expense pool for qualified candidates?
Okay, thank you. And something to, that we would have to look into. So it's nothing we can comment on right now.
She's usually full of good ideas. To your point real quick, you have to do all these things, or you're required to do these things as a mayor. You're the first to be seen out there, and you're usually the first to take a lot of flack. That's worth something too. And each and every single one of you guys, I mean, you guys are under a microscope. So once again, going and speaking to anybody that listens to this now or later, is yes, it is a good idea to figure out a fair compensation, whether living wage or just a small amount.
Okay.
So one item that I would like to bring up. Most of the audience here is county. We don't have the authority to recommend input to be amended, to put out to vote. How can we help you get these things on the agenda to be voted for? That's the issue. Just like what y'all were saying, you can't just suggest that you're now compensated at this point. We have to get somebody to stand up here and recommend something so that we can get it to the vote. So I would ask that anybody that lives within the city come up and make something, a recommendation for them.
One thing I saw in studying these other cities, and I was looking through the documentation on what they actually called it, but it's like it's a group of people, and that's their job, they're citizens, and it's the citizens that will be meeting in the next couple of weeks, and let the citizens come together and make their own suggestions to come forth. So I was hoping to have more city people here, because I would like to suggest that there are people that could come together. They could meet on their own. They could take what we're saying here, and then they could come and make their recommendation on the 30th and say, this is what 5 people or 10 people want to suggest as far as these discussions that we're having. That takes the burden off of because we should not be voting behind here. This is for the people.
That's correct, Ms. Debbie.
What about doing something over at the Civic Center? Why not cook some hot dogs? Mr. Nyhoff, what do we got in the coffers? Cook some hot dogs? Seriously, cook some hot dogs, offer some water, some free drinks, stuff like that to get the city folk in here, and then give them a piece of paper and say, hey, these are the issues. What are your ideas? Give them some hot dogs and hamburgers to sit there and fill those papers, work out, have something to chew on while they're doing it. They put them into a box, and there you go. Because I'll tell you right now, it took me, I spoke here one time in 2 years, and I never came back. People saw that, and people saw the way that not this council, but they were treated every time they came up here and pressed this mic. I know I've talked to a lot of people that are scared to still come here. They're still scared. And to your guys' credit, each and every single one of you, including you in the beautiful meeting that you and I had for 30 minutes or so in your office, it's not a scary place anymore. So open that up, give back to the community a little bit, and ask for their input. And I'm kind of hungry. I might try to sneak in as a county resident, but seriously, think something like that over at the Civic Center.
All right, thank you. Did you have something? All right.
Well, I want to thank everyone for trying to give us some money. That's nice. I think 3 years term limit's a good one. I don't believe that we should make it to where you only serve 3 terms. I don't believe we should get any money for it either. If you're doing a bad job, they'll vote you out. If you try to do a good job and you got a good thing going and you get a good city manager and you're doing well for the city, let's keep rolling. It's a lot of work. It's more work than I thought it was going to be. But I knew what it paid when I signed on. So, and if we start talking about money now, everybody's be like, well, that didn't take long, did it? So, I want to stick with what the charter's got. That's my opinion on it.
All righty. Councilman Hagman, I just wanted, I know you're on, I guess you.
Yes. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, I kind of agree with Carl in terms of the pay. I didn't join and get elected focused on that. If that's something the citizens are eager to do, that's fine by me. It's just more for me to donate. At the same time, one thing that I did hear a lot in my election when talking with folks is a lot of business owners that have a physical presence in the city who pay a lot of taxes, yet don't feel like they have a voice. And I don't know how popular that thought is, and Lee, jump in if I'm out of line here, but not sure if there's anything we could add to propose folks that do have a physical brick and mortar presence, but business in the city, but may not live in the city. I mean, I feel like they're paying more taxes than folks that are living in a residence, and yet they feel like they don't have a voice. So I don't know what folks' thoughts are there.
All right, Lee.
Mayor, would you like me to respond?
Yes, ma'am.
So, I mean, to vote in an election, you're going to have to meet the residency requirements to vote. There are some other things potentially that could be allowed. For example, there could be commissions or boards or things like that you would not necessarily have to be a resident, but perhaps if you owned a business, you could use that as a way of trying to get some of those folks to have a greater voice. There are some limitations on when residency would matter or not. For example, if you all had appointed a charter commission, those people would need to have been residents, like voting people that were eligible to vote. I hear what you're saying, and unfortunately, or as the case is, that's just the way the law is it's set up so that who can vote is more limited.
I called Michelle Fortin. Oh, go ahead, Jonathan.
Jonathan, go ahead. You have the floor.
Okay. That's fine, Lee. I appreciate that. I just know that was a big question that came up a lot, and so I'm definitely glad we are able to clarify that. In terms of term limits, I mean, I would agree that 2 is limited. 3 is good. 3 would have been a decent number. A year to get used to things. Especially like now, we had a number of items that we had to jump feet first in, and kind of drinking from the fire hose. And then now, right, as things settle, right, you get more into the, how do you manage and what are the best choices for the town? I would agree with a term limit increase. And then in addition to that, if you're increasing the term limit, maybe capping that over, X amount, whatever that discussion looks like, however many sessions of that term. But that's all I had to add at the moment.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
I was going to say that
Thank you.
I visited with Michelle Horton, who is the Titus County election administrator, because I knew this would come up. And I, too, have been hit with the topic that Jonathan said everybody is wanting. If they're business owners, they own a building, they own a business, they want to be able to vote on their taxes. So I asked Michelle, and she replied to me. She said, I called and spoke to the legal department at the Secretary of State. They said no change to a city charter can trump the state law of eligibility. He said there was not a way around that. Sorry, I thought that this was what he had shown me before. And what they sent me was Title II voter qualifications and registration. And it's Chapter 11. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's there. And again, Title II voter qualifications and registrations, Chapter 11. So that's the state law. And what would have to happen is that our representatives would be the ones that would have to change it at the state level. It's not anything we can do here.
That's correct. All right. Did we have anything else as far as term limit goes before we move on to the next? All right, let's go.
Y'all sick of me yet? Okay. So the vacancies, one thing that we had discussed after we had a city councilman resign was the discussion of the appointment and or an election. Because we really didn't want to have a special election after we had just gotten through having an election. But because the charter didn't have anything in it mentioning appointment, we couldn't. And so I want to make sure, Lee, is that correct, that because it was not in our charter, or is that a state thing?
Yeah, so the state law allows for appointment if someone vacates with 5 months to go. In other words, it's not cost effective or worthwhile to try to hold an election for that. And so that's what state law provides for. So the provision that's been drafted is basically of vacancies of more than 6 months in office, that then you would hold an election. But for vacancies of mayor or council of less than 6 months, the vacancy could be filled by the council.
Okay, I just wanted y'all to talk about that. Anybody want to talk?
No, that's what I understood previously, is that it was 6 months. I mean, we've had to have elections. Anything 6 months or out, we've always had to have the election.
Next would be the Section 4, which is the qualifications. I wanted to make sure that it was in there that said that they were a resident of Mount Pleasant. And that I read other cities, and they were somehow saying that they had to be residents of a year. And then they also, I thought it was interesting that I'm looking exactly, but the term they used was a bona fide resident, that they were actually bona fide resident that had lived there for 12 months before they could run for city council, and that they had, as far as a residence. So I wanted to talk about the qualifications and the wording in that. where it says the mayor and each council member shall be residents of the city of Mount Pleasant.
How do you verify that residency?
When I was reading the other city, it was interesting. They had it twice under that same category of qualifications. They said residents of their town, and then they said that they are a bona fide resident. And I thought, well, so they might have had the same problem, you know, as far as qualifying that they really were living there.
But again, how do they verify that? What standards do they use? Because I mean, if your homestead on your property tax, if your car insurance, if you're paying, you know, if that's your IRS return says that's your address. I mean, how do you put an ankle bracelet on them to monitor them?
I don't know, but that's something I think we need to discuss.
I'm fine with that, except how I think you do need to be clear on how it gets proven or disproven.
Yeah, that's the wording. So Lee?
Go ahead, Ms. Lee.
I was going to say, Lee, do you have any suggestions on wording? I know Frank had.
So, yeah, what we included in the charter is that a provision that allows the city council to adopt an ordinance requiring certain documentation that gives you more flexibility depending on how the law might change in terms of what the election code provides for. The bona fide part is basically saying, you know, for real, like you're really a resident, right? You're not just, it's not made up. And so like some councils that we represent have used like a utility bill that's going to show something that, you know, current usage at a particular residence within the city. But we would recommend, instead of you putting that detail in the charter, you just adopt a ordinance that would allow the council potentially some greater flexibility as somewhat, you know, as the law might change or other things might come into play. So that's why we've proposed it that way. That would be our recommendation for you.
Thank you, Lee. Go ahead.
There definitely needs to be other things that come into play. Let's face it, Texas, no income tax. If I really wanted to, I could live in another state, put all my businesses here in Mount Pleasant, and I could serve on that council.
Thank you.
Well, if you're registered to vote, I believe it's only legal to be registered to vote at one location in the United States. And I think that's correct. So, I mean, if they're registered to vote in Mount Pleasant in the city, and their address states, you know, I mean, I'm still back to the question, and I'm open for this, but how do you verify it?
You listen. Guys, you guys are in that back room having meetings. I've seen you guys in town. I've sat behind you when you guys were having, you know, not discussions with council stuff, but when you're just out there chit-chatting. Listen to each other. It's integrity. I mean, you guys know where everybody lives. You guys know where you spend most of your time. I mean, just listen, and I'm not directing this at you at all. I just listen to each other. I mean, come on. You cannot live in another city or another state, be registered to vote here in Titus County, still drive back and forth. You know how many miles I put on my vehicle? I mean, come on now.
I think it's bona fide enough. If you are a registered voter in this city, you have utilities that state that you're getting your bills there, your IRS statements, whatever. You have enough proof to prove that you're a resident in that aspect. I don't think it'd take much more than that. And with this town as small as it is, believe me, I know just about where probably 80% of the people live here. I know a lot of people in this town, and if I don't, I'm pretty sure someone I know does. Yeah, I think that's enough. Kelly, did you have anything else?
Well, I had said to discuss, I did want to bring up the white elephant in the room, which was the salary, but y'all did that. And then one thing I wanted to make sure, I had mentioned this earlier, in the charter, there are things that are already in the charter that I want to make sure people know. If you go to section 16, where it says the duties and the powers of the council, and you read through 1 through 10 or 11, they renumbered it, but it talks about what the duties of the council is. And one thing that I saw in number 2, these are things that I'm sure we will not do in the future, but it's that the council will establish all administrative departments, whether specifically provided for herein or not, as deemed necessary. My understanding is in the past, sometimes there have been departments created without discussion. And so I want to make sure that we adhere to that, so that whenever there are new things or new positions that are going to be made, we're kind of prepared for that. We discuss it as council. And then also where it's number 5, where it says inquire into the conduct of any office, department, or agency of the city and make investigations to a municipal affair. That falls on us, the council. If there are things that are not going on that's appropriate, it's up to us, the council, to inquire and to conduct. And so you can't turn a blind eye to things. I will go further down to trying to find it here. Hold on. Okay, if you go down to section 5, where it says powers and duties, and this is the powers and the duties of the city manager. It's already in our charter. And I had a meeting earlier with Manager Nyhoff. I'm sorry, I was just going to call you Greg. I'm sorry. But number D says that this is the city manager to exercise supervision and control over all departments, offices, agencies created by this charter, and that may hereafter be created by the city council, except as otherwise provided. So we should be working alongside with the city manager on the different departments. And then if you come on down to number H, number H, it says to make a full written report to the city council as soon after the close of each month's accounts as possible, showing the operation and the expenditures of each department of the city government for the preceding month, and a comparison of such monthly expenditures by departments with the monthly allowances made for such departments in the annual budget, and to keep the council advised at all times as to the financial condition and the needs of the city. Basically, this is already in our charter, and it has nothing to do with Manager Nyhoff. It will be with whoever's coming. That we want to make sure that this is in place and being done, because as I suggested, an Excel spreadsheet or something that I could take home and read at 9:30 at night. We don't have to be up here meeting. But there were a lot of things that when I sat in your seats that I had questions about what was happening and that the council was allowing to happen. And they probably did not know. So in the defense of the previous council, there were probably a lot of things that were going on that they did not know. Yeah, you told them. But my point is going forward, if we can get this report that's already in our charter established, from the city manager, I think that will help us. I call it watchdog, that the city councilmen are watchdogs. And I think if we can get that established, that is something that will help us go forward. So I just wanted to bring that up, that is already in the charter. And I'm done.
In that item, Kelly, there's section 2, residence of the city manager. And it says the city manager need not be a resident of the city at the time of the appointment, but shall within 6 months after such appointment maintain a residence inside the city while in office. I got a question about the motivation of that. It's a job. It's a paid job. It's a paid job that basically they serve at the pleasure of the council members. So why do they have to live in the city? And part of that is, again, you've got a lot of talent that's not only in the city, but it's in the county too. So just a question on that, why that would be a motivation to have that, because I don't think it's a conflict of interest as in that position to be not living in the city, if that makes any sense of what I'm trying to convey.
Lee, I direct this question to you.
So legally, it is not required that the city manager be a resident of the community that he or she serves in. It is an optional issue. And so it isn't required. I think, if you wanted to, there's reasons, of course, that you would want someone to be, such as, being subjected to the same type of rules, taxes, etc. It could, but there could also be the possibility of it being something besides a resident of the city. It could be that you require that a resident of the county. I mean, you have options on that. It is not required. A lot of communities do include that for the reason that they want somebody, for lack of a better word, to have sort of skin in the game, know the community, and so on. But it is not legally required.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I guess I think there's a lot of skin in the game if you live in this area. Because just by default, this area relies upon the county, and the county relies upon the city. And so it's very mutual. I have found it to be very mutual between the city and the county. I'm here, I have no agenda to do this, okay? I'm retired, I'm a farmer, I like what I do, okay? But I live in the county, yet I'm here in the city, and I got skin in the game, and heavy skin in the game as a county resident. So I could see somebody living in the county, but still having that serious skin in the game, if you will, for the city. Thank you.
I think the reason that it's in there in the city is because we had a guy living in Heath, Texas that spent 4 years ruining our city. So we want to have safeguards that they live here. I think the county would be good enough. But if the council wants the city, I'll go with it.
And does it say obtain a resident in the city or primary residence? That's right. I was actually, I appreciate it.
It says need not be, it says the city manager need not be a resident of the city at the time of appointment, but shall in 6 months after such appointment, maintain a residence inside the city while in office.
I would personally like to see something within the city manager's conditions and rules and things that they pull from the city. They pull from the county. In other words, the talents, the cookie makers, the flower makers, the people that are best for the job. I'm sorry, but none of this DEI stuff. Get me the best pilot. Pull from resources. And then as to what Steve said, I want a city manager that hears those sirens when somebody gets shot at Whataburger. Hears those shots at Walmart. Goes to those parking lot with those stinking blue lights that are proven to give you less visual depth perception and things like that. I want somebody, and if that's a county resident that can do that, because I'll tell you what, I have women in my life I will not send into this city at night, period, end of story. So a city manager that's going through that can actually work with you guys and represent some of the county, that would be awesome, because there are decisions made here that do affect us there. It would be nice to have somewhat at least of a voice. So that's all I gotta say about that.
I also feel like if you limit it just to the city, that the people applying may not want to apply, may miss a good applicant. But if you open it up to the county, I think you'd get more people that might feel better about living here.
Well, I will say this. I've been around and working with the city for about 37, 38 years, and I have never met anyone who cared more about our city than those who live right here with us, and I'm not afraid to go anywhere in this city. I did it when I worked here. I go anywhere at night and visit with anyone because I feel safe in our city. But if you live here, you understand our needs in our neighborhoods and our parks. You understand. And if you guys on the council are going to be required to live in the city because you're a part of that decision making, then the guy or the girl who's going to lead us, and every one of y'all, we should all be in the same boat right here together, because no one cares more than your neighbor about what our city looks like and what we do in the future.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right, Debbie, did you have anything further? I'm Debbie. I'm so used to saying Debbie. I'm sorry. Councilmember Redford, did you have anything further?
Well, I did want to ask Greg, excuse me, Manager Naha. So since you have managed quite a few cities and towns, I'd like to hear your perspective on some of our discussions.
Well, so this might sound like I'm copping out, shall we say, but I do believe that at this point in time, this is kind of your first meeting to start throwing that out. I don't want to start telling you what experience I've had. I will say about the city manager, if you allow me to do that. I was not required in a lot of instances to live within the city. However, my wife and I chose, because you do have to pay the same utility bill. So when you raise those utilities, that goes up, and your taxes, the permit fees go up. You just name it. That does impact your city business, and you do drive through your city every day in different neighborhoods, and you get to see what life is like. And your life is 7 days a week, your city, which is why sometimes city managers would have to get out of their city, because it's your life, but you live. Now, I would say, that being said, I think the comment about a city versus a county, now, plenty of county people, which that's me currently, I come here and I do all my shopping here. It's where I do come. And so I look at that option and say, and I'll just say for us, we are looking for a little bit of land with wherever we move. And so we love this city. I loved this city before I lived outside of Mount Vernon, and just watching it, because we always came here. And so I would say there's really big pluses to both of those, I think. Sometimes there will be, as I think Councilmember Hinton did say, I do think that you may get some people who say, I want a little land with this. And cities are usually urbanized areas. And so you're going to go across the line. So there's pros and cons to both of those. I personally have said I need to live in the city that I serve, just because that's who I'm managing. That's who I provide the services for very specifically. Yes, county, people that live in the county and do businesses, they all matter too. Somebody said, we want a voice. Well, we should be, and I'm sure this council does, is the Chamber of Commerce or downtown group represent those. We just have to listen to them. Understand they don't get that vote. So I think it's important to do live in the city, but I think it's a good discussion to have about county. I wouldn't go any farther than that. Even if putting a circle around your city, because you want them close too. You want a quick response if it ever needs to happen. But I think that's something to think about as you go through this, because it would limit some people from saying, I want to live I want to have 2 acres or 5 acres or something, and so you might get that. But for me, it's been very strong heart of hearts to say, I just need to, my son needs to play baseball in the Little League in the city. You just see the parents, you see the schools, you see it all day long, and you interact with the people when you actually live here, and you do it on the weekends, and you do that all the time. So I personally felt quite strong about it, but I could tell you many cities have gotten away from that. And so it's not bad, because you want to find the most qualified person to run your business, which when you talk about $30-some million, it is a business. You don't want to just pick somebody because they live here, because they might not run your city well, and then you're going to be really disappointed in that. And so there's things to weigh on all the topics you're discussing today. But I just said there's always something to say about just living here and your commitment when you make that, when you say, I'm going to be your city manager in Mount Pleasant and I live here. That's kind of like a trump card, shall we say. And so I tell you what I think, but I think there are some good comments and some good options that really need to be considered. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Do we have anything further? Okay. All right, I have one last thing. I on the paper that I passed around to you guys earlier, and I'm not speaking for myself, but as the position as mayor, and it's been brought up before about voting, and I know we like to compare ourselves to other cities, and 2 of the cities that you mentioned earlier, Kilgore and Greenville, their mayor votes. And I think it's important, and I say that, whether it be me, the next person, or whatever, but as somebody that is constantly involved in having to answer to the public on a regular basis, should have some say-so in this position. I'm not sure how everyone feels about that, but it's just my personal feeling is that, when I ran for office, I was representing people. I wanted 66% of the vote. That's a lot of constituents. That's a lot of people that feel like my opinion, representation for them matters. And I'm sure that they'll feel that way about the next mayor, but it is a position that I feel like that should be voting, and that's just my honest opinion. So that was the one thing that I wanted to bring out.
We had mentioned it before, and when I read, like I said, I think there's about 6 or 7 cities that I looked at, and there were some cities that had 7. There were some cities that had 6 as far as councilmen, and some of the elections were not done at large. So like right now, we run at large, which means it's not just that I live in the Dellwood Park area and I represent just the Dellwood Park. I represent everybody. But what some of these cities are doing is that, let's say there's 6 or 7 people running for council, and the mayor is selected from those 6 or 7 people. they're not running just for mayor. And so I thought that was interesting. I had never seen that before.
Yeah, I think Sulphur Springs is one of those cities that, if I'm not mistaken, they just, I think it was the Tyler Law that they just recently sworn in.
So some of them, so I'd say some of those that especially have more councilmen, then they do have the mayor.
Okay. All right, thank you. But that was the one thing that I wanted to address. If anyone have any more comments, floor is open. If not, then I guess we'll be getting ready to conclude here. Did you have anyone online? Candace? You had a question, Ms. Sproul?
Okay, we're gonna try to meet again on the 30th of July. From what has been presented here tonight, Ms. Ream, will your people have a chance to put some rough drafts or maybe some final drafts on some of these issues? And is this 30th will the 30th be an opportunity to bring up any new concerns or ideas, or is that meeting just to discuss? Is it going to be limited to what's been mentioned here tonight in context?
So, excuse me. So we can prepare some language based on the comments that were heard tonight, and obviously there are various options there to consider that can be discussed even further at the meeting on July 30th. Additional things could be added. But we have to be cognizant that the city council has to approve the ballot that would go to the voters by August 16th. And so, you've got your first meeting, I think on August 6th, a regular meeting. If you had to, I guess you could call a special meeting to get that done if that's what you decided to do. The council does have a great deal of discretion in making a decision about what by majority vote of what would be on the ballot, but we literally would be preparing that ballot so that it would be passed by the council by that date.
What do y'all think about putting together a task force of citizens that have heard what we've discussed? Let them get together between now and the 30th, and that they can present that to us. We can then take what they've done, and then we can go forward.
How do you get those people quickly committed and even understand kind of what we're doing?
Well, as I'm looking at what we have here, who I love, I'm thankful that y'all are here, and they are. That's what I was going to say. But I wasn't sure if we could put a task force together, since there are some county folks here, if they're even willing. Can we use the county folks for their suggestions?
This may be insulting to people that are going to watch it now or later, but it seems to me the past year and a half, 2 years, it has been the county folks that have come in here for the most part. Not all. There have been city folks, like that one, that come in here and address this council, the last council and this council, et cetera, et cetera. Let's find a way to engage these city folks that are the ones that are able to vote. And let's get it done. The free hot dogs, a carnival, I don't know. Let's throw tomatoes at you guys. I mean, whatever we need to do to pay some money to engage you in order to get things done. And let's figure it out.
I do. I'm sitting here thinking about it. There definitely need to be some engagement with the community. We have to get this out to the community. And as far as getting a committee together to do this for us, who's going to cover it more, us or them? I feel like that we, ourselves as council members, and then as far as a committee, is that committee gonna reach everybody? See, because when we're talking about the city, we're talking about the entire city of Mount Pleasant. Everyone has to, because are they gonna reach all the voters is what I'm saying with that committee. And that, so we have to make sure that everybody is aware of it, and that starts with getting involved.
We'd have to do a mail out to like we'd have to just do a mail out very quickly, I think is gonna be the most, we don't have enough newspaper circulation and things anymore. We don't have enough email addresses, and things. Facebook maybe, but I think if we really wanna make one last effort and find a concise way to do a mail out very quickly is probably about the only way I know of to get anybody. It's just that time is so short to, and it's summertime, there's vacations. It's a tough time. If we were gonna put this off until the May election for the voting, we'd have a lot more time to methodically go. One thing that bothers me is I feel like we rush. And since we're limited to every 2 years to readdress charter changes, that's my only concern. I understand we want to get it done, but I also would like to be vetted and thorough on all these ideas. I think we've heard some wonderful ideas, and I think there's definitely some changes that need to be made. I just feel extremely rushed, and it'd give us time to reach out to the public more and let them understand what this means to the community to make these charter changes.
So when you talk about rushed, I will say that I know that the previous council did discuss some of these issues in 22. So when I got this list or started looking at the charter with Candace and Frank, that there were a lot of these things that had been addressed in 22, but it never did go to a vote for the citizens.
And that is correct. I gotta agree with you, Mr. Reverend, on it. I don't feel like we may be rushed in the moment, but as far as the public, a lot of the public been aware of this for a while. They've been aware of it. If you know me, you probably see me around town because I don't sit still. I'm not the mayor that stay in the house. I'm out and I'm involved. I do get around quite a bit, and as far as it being new to the public, I just don't think it is.
When I hear you say that, I believe you because I've spent a half hour alone in a room with you, with an armed guard outside, I believe. But either way, when I have talked to people, you had a council for 3.5, 4 years that drove this budget through the ceiling. And when anybody would get up here, if they weren't in line, guess what happened to them? I can show you the 15 minutes of fame I got. I'm sure you've all seen it. They're scared. Miss Spruill just brought up a great idea. May, what's the rush? That way you guys can prove to them that you're not big and scary, and you're not going to throw them under a bus, and you're not going to grandstand them for 5 minutes and embarrass the ever-loving hell out of them. Gain the trust of your people. Give to them. I know we don't have a lot of money to do it, but figure out a way. And if you do that, then do this in May. That's a wonderful idea. You've got to go slow to go fast.
Mayor. So just so that that the city understands the consequence, if you go forward with the election and one of the numerous items, assuming they're numerous, on the ballot passes, the city is then barred from or prevented from doing another election for 2 full years. So like this election, I think would be November 5th. And so in 2 years, if that date would be November 4th, you'd have to wait a third year basically. And so I just want you to be aware of that. And then secondly, if you decided that you wanted to appoint like a charter commission, that is a process. It takes time. And then that body has to meet and convene and so on and so forth. And that usually is going to be over a series of months. And you're wanting, first of all, they have to be residents of the city. And then secondly, though, you want them to be a diverse group that cover a lot of interest.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. City Secretary Webster, did you want to say something before I say something? Well, I was going to ask you, so are we, I can't recall, we talked about whether we were going to go to the Civic Center for a meeting or not. Did we end up saying yes to that, or were we just doing 2 meetings here?
We can do it at the Civic Center. We can do it here. As you see, the turnout is what you have. I will make this note. You get a bigger turnout in November than you do in a May election. There's a big difference in the amount of people that come out to vote.
So Mr. Mayor, if I could just, so I'm going to throw out a suggestion, and that we have a council meeting in a week, and that we think about this. One of the things we would do is, when we wanted to ensure community input, is we would call a meeting with the Planning Commission with various groups that you've appointed or that have taken interest in this city, that have said, we love our city and we're willing to come together and be part of this conversation, because they've invested in that. Now, that doesn't exclude anyone else, because I think we need to get the information out there, but it does give you a core of people who said, yes, I'm going to stand up for my city. And they've already spoken. So that is a thought that maybe at the next meeting we can just agendize another discussion about this, which would be the 16th, and we're scheduled to meet on the 30th. And we can all think about, how do we get more people engaged very specifically? And food does bring people, always. And so maybe there's something there. But we don't want to skip anybody, but we also need a core group. And if it is the council's decision to move this and do this in November, we do have to keep it moving. And so one other question, Mr. Mayor, I have, and Attorney, so one thing that I think we just need to be clear of tonight is you've suggested some things. Now, you haven't made any decisions tonight, and I think that it would be important that maybe we could just recap those real quick. I don't know, Lee, if you wrote those down. Recap them so we can make sure we reflect what you expect to see, what's going to be part of the discussion again, and then we can post that, and maybe we can look at a way to get feedback off of that posting too, and put it on Facebook or whatever. Please comment on these. So if you don't mind, Mayor, I'm going to read what I have. Or Lee, do you think you have a good list of the very specific kind of things they talked about today to consider?
I think so. I mean, I've basically been, as comments were made, documenting them alongside of the provisions of the charter. And so the first that I have is with regard to terms of office. And I heard, and this really kind of combines a couple of different things, but that increasing the term to 3 years as opposed to 2. And what I heard a lot of people expressing is term limits would be necessary if there was more significant compensation. But some people were for term limits and others were not. I did not hear as much consensus on whether or not that was desired, but we already have that draft prepared. But we would increase that. We would change the term limit the term provision, which is a different section of the charter, and where it talks about when elections occur. So that would be like in section 9. So we would make changes to check section 9 for this 3-year period. I think the qualification issue, I did not hear anything that was, I mean, I'm happy to add the word bona fide if somebody would like me to do that. That's the only real change that I heard there about residency qualifications for council members. And then, the issue of salary, I think, so just so that the council is clear, what the charter refers to is salary. That is what the term is. And so what I heard a lot of people talking about is it being more something like maybe more like a stipend to reflect the commitment that council members are contributing. And I would say one person was very specific. A member of the public was very specific about it being $500 for council members and $600 for mayor. And then, of course, there were many people that were opposed to it being, including 2 council members that were opposed to it being any increase at all. And so to me, that's where I would really need some direction on, I mean, I can prepare something as a possibility for the council to consider. Ultimately, the council will have to decide what they would like to include in that, but I could prepare a draft with the proposed language indicated by the member of the public of 500 and 600, the 500 and 600. Just provide me some direction on that.
Go ahead, Council. Did y'all have anything on it? You just said you had there were 2 council members that was opposed to the salary or was fine with where it is. And my opinion, I guess at this time, if I'm not mistaken, it's 2-4. We're not voting, but my opinion was that we would go forward with actually adding that on. At the end of the day, it's the opinion of the public. It's the citizens that's got to make that choice.
So I can prepare one that sort of lays out the 500, 600 number, and it still allows you to contemplate different numbers.
Yes. I don't need to be bound by that number. Again, like I said, that's going to be on the person that proposed it. Yes, come up. You can come up and so she can hear you.
Can it be stated where there is an option on the ballot for like 200 and 250 or the 500, 600? Can there be multiple options for them to vote on?
No, because you risk that you might get multiple outcomes that conflict. It really is an up or down vote of a particular proposal on the ballot. Like if it just could come out that people vote for the same thing multiple times. It can be very confusing. So I wouldn't recommend that you put that as an option. I mean, let me just say there is another way that you go in which the council is given, that it could bear relationship to something else that you want it to have some relationship to. It's hard to, like it could bear relationship to some, to the minimum wage times some multiplier or something. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of different options of things you could consider doing besides an actual number, but we want to be clear so that people in the public understand what it is that was intended by the proposal that's made.
Yes, Mr. Nell.
So, attorney, so I think what I was thinking is that they didn't make this decisions tonight because that wasn't the purpose of tonight's meeting. And so, I mean, I hear you saying, I can fit this specific item into the charter, but yet they're still under discussion. They're still out there. So what I was thinking, Mayor and Council, is that we meet in a week, that we kind of get together. So for instance, there was a lot of discussion about, do we do a 3-year term of office or a 2-year term of office? Well, currently it's 2, and 3 is what was discussed. So that becomes not filled in necessarily on there, but it was a topic of discussion. We talked about what kind of salary, shall we say. Well, currently it says it's 50 and 25, based in 1940, whatever it was when it was established. And the conversations today were, there was a $500 and $600 amount put out there. And so again, all we're trying to do is capture some of the concept ideas that you discussed today so that we can get feedback. What I would suggest staff could do is we could put that together for you, be it part of the package coming out for the next council meeting, and you can see it, and we'll itemize it for a discussion so that if you want to narrow it down or add or delete at that point in time, that way when we go to the 30th, you have a lot, people can see the different options you were looking at, because come the 30th, you're going to have to start making the decisions if we want to get on the ballot pretty quickly. So we want to really try to capture as quickly as we can what was talked about here, and then move right into it, because I don't think you really had a lot of conversations about a lot of items. Does the mayor vote? Well, I think if the mayor is going to vote, you also probably ought to talk about a 7-member council, because you need an odd number, whatever you do, whether it's 5 or 7. So those are just things I think we can capture the concepts and some of the ideas that were set forth out here, and not say this is the one we're going to put in the charter and this is the one. So you still have time, people can vote on them, say I like the 2, I like the 3, whatever that is. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. I think that was part of that petition also, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that was on there. I didn't mention it, but it was on that petition also, as far as a change of the charter, as far as an additional council member. I did see that. Yeah, I do think there was what you just spoke of is the direction that we need to go.
As a voting councilman, I will not send a vote to the public giving us a raise. It's 25 and 50. We signed up for it. That's the way it's got to be. If you don't like it, resign.
Go ahead, sir.
I know I brought up the salary thing, and that was on my heart for a long time. I'd like to basically express Councilwoman Sproul's concern about rushing things. We kind of can look at these issues as long-term structural changes to the city council and to the city. And we might look at some of these things maybe for the 2 years beyond. What are the immediate things that we really need right now? One of the most immediate things we need right now is we're going to be conducting a search for a city manager. I think we need to cast the net, not just to the city, but maybe consider the city and the county. That's a reasonable stretch for people to understand that in a short-term way, because that is something that's very tactical, that needs to happen, and it's within the scope of 2 years from now that needs to happen. Some of these other things we may just look at longer term. This city council signed up to Councilman Hinton's place of $50 and $25. Maybe we just need to table that. Maybe because of all the changes that have occurred, that might be a little quick right now, that we maybe need to socialize that, and we can't necessarily do that in the next 30 days, whether you're on one side or the other. But maybe we look at these as what are long-term structural changes that we need to do, and what are the short-term tactical things that we need to do. As much as I understand your desire for having that vote, bringing that up, I certainly understand that desire, but that does also involve adding another council person. That's a real long-term thing to be able to do. As much as I would love to be able to embrace that and do that in the next 30, 45 days, that might be a stretch for what we're trying to do as a city. I hope that helps.
Oh, I certainly agree with it. And this is, again, this is for position, not necessarily myself, because I may be out of here in next year, you know. So I'm just saying, as the position itself, as much time that's needed to be taken, I don't believe we should rush on anything. Everything need to be thoroughly done, you know. So no matter what the changes are, there's, like you said, there's some things on there that do need more attention than others. And as far as the time it's going to take to get all of that done, as far as maybe adding another seat or whatever, that is not what's priority right now. It's not priority to me, and it shouldn't be priority to anyone up here. So, but we do need to thoroughly go through and make the changes necessary. I don't think we should be putting it off as far. It need to be done as soon as possible, but not rushed.
I was out of the room for a while, but hearing what has been said, I would ask that, and I agree, and you get your head wrapped around so many different things, but I agree the most important thing now is to get our city back on its feet. I would say let's table this till a few months down, and in the meantime, you guys appoint a charter committee like they were talking about. Let them study it, work with the council, report back, and after further consideration, and thank you, Carl, you're so great. But I would say we put this off for a while and don't rush, because you've got so many more important things going on right now.
All right.
I just want to follow something up real quick. Mr. Hinton, you and I are friends both outside, and you're also counsel. When I hear you say the 25 and 50, in another time I'd agree with you. I'd absolutely agree with you. Pick up your phone and check out what $50 was worth in 1948 and tell me what that figure is real quick. And if you don't want to take it, that's great. Do what Trump did. He donated it. You're part of a hospital, donate back to the hospital, donate to the city, things like that. The reason why I say this is because when you guys ran, how many people did you run against? Just one. How many other people ran with you as far as for your position? None. So it may be that money might be what it takes to get these city folks to actually start stepping up and coming in here. So don't necessarily say, well, I don't want that money. If you don't want that money, that's cool. There's no problem with that. You can do anything with that money that you want. Donate it. Do whatever. Give it to the homeless, whatever. But don't cast that vote saying no that could potentially shut the whole thing down when we get there. Think of it that way. Take a look what that money was worth then as what it's worth now, and that might just be the thing that gets people in. Think about it.
All right, thank you. Do we have anything further? All right, it's been a pleasure. I'm glad you all came out. We did a lot of adventuring into this charter, and it's been great. Ms. Lee, I thank you for joining us again tonight, and I thank you for all you do for us here at the city. At this time, we're going to go ahead and adjourn. Again, everyone enjoy the rest of your day.